In this video, we will be talking about relationships, specifically relationships between entities. Two entities can have many relationships with each other. The simplest form of relationship that can exist between two entities is known as a one-to-many relationship. What does it mean for two entities to be related to each other? It means that records in one entity are related to records in another entity. Take, for example, a student and courses that are present and available at a university. How is one student, any student, related to courses available at a university? A student enrolls in many courses. Consequently, the record of a student is associated with the record of a course, signifying that enrollment of a student in a course. What this means is that some piece of information about the student needs to be associated with a piece of information about the course. That is the relationship. And because a student can take, in fact, many courses, that becomes a one-to-many relationship. Present in front of you, you see the relationship between nation and stock. A nation can have many stocks. That is the one-to-many relationship. On the many side of the relationship, you see a specific type of notation, and that notation is known as a crow's foot. A one-to-many relationship means that, specifically in the case of nation and stock, nation is associated with many stocks. A nation has, in fact, many stocks. You find one-to-many relationships in hierarchies very frequently. For example, a firm has many divisions. A division has many departments. A department can have many sections. Consider the following two tables with data in them. One table called nation, one entity called nation, and one entity or table called stock. How do we associate specific stocks with specific nations? Well, we need some piece of information about the nation present in stock so that a stock is associated with the nation. Well, what is a good piece of information to put into the stock table or in the stock entity? Well, NAT code, which is the primary key of nation, is a good piece of information to use in the stock table, as NAT code uniquely identifies each stock. Consequently, putting NAT code in the stock table allows us to associate each stock with a specific nation, as you can see in the table below. When the primary key of one table, in this case NAT code of the nation table, is present as a column in the second table, for example, NAT code in the stock table, NAT code in the stock table is referred to as a foreign key. It is the column that associates records in the stock table with specific records in the nation table. One important concept associated with the notion of primary key and foreign keys is that of the referential integrity constraint, or the foreign key constraint. This constraint applies to values of NAT code in the stock table. The referential integrity constraint or the foreign key constraint basically states that one cannot have values of NAT code in the stock table if those values aren't already present as the primary key in the nation table. For example, I cannot have a stock associated with a nation, for instance, Finland, if Finland does not exist in the nation table. That is known as the referential integrity constraint. One important question we need to address once we understand one-to-many relationships is, if two tables do have a one-to-many relationship, how do we bring the data in the two tables together? For that purpose, we have a specific clause. It is called the join on clause. Let's take a look at an example of how this would work. Let us first start by taking a look at the two tables, nation and stock. This is the table nation. Obviously, it is in the text database. I'm just going to use the text database. That is why the query did not run. So I shall use the text database first, and then select star from nation. And I see that I have 4 different nations with NAT code as the primary key of nation. The second table is the table stock. And I see that I have 16 rows in the stock table. Specifically, in the stock table, I have one additional column. I have this column called NAT code, and the values of NAT code in the stock table correspond to values of NAT code in the nation table. So obviously, each stock is associated with a specific nation, belongs to a specific nation. How does one bring the data in these two tables together? As I mentioned, the join on clause does that. And here's how it works. Let us start by just doing select star, because I want to select all the columns of both the tables. And I say from nation. I will always start with the table on the one side of the relationship. I don't have to do this, but for the purpose of clarity, I try to start with tables on the one side of relationships. And so the nation table is on the one side of the relationship. So I shall start from there. And from nation, I say join the nation table to the stock table. So select star from nation, join stock. So take the nation table and join it to the stock table. Now, after join stock, I have the on part of this clause. These two tables are joined based on values in specific columns, based on values of NAT code in the nation table, and based on values of NAT code in the stock table. And so the on clause is building that relationship between these two columns. And so I say on nation.natcode, the nation table's NAT code column, to be equal to the stock table's NAT code column, semicolon. And when I run this query, we see that I have columns of the nation table, NAT code, NAT name, and exchange rate, joined with columns of the stock table, stock code, stock form, stock price, stock quantity, stock dividend, stock P to E ratio, and the NAT code in the stock table. These two tables have now been joined, giving me 16 rows, but a lot more columns. Now, this is how we join two tables that have a one-to-many relationship, where the primary key is joined to the foreign key on the many side of the relationship. A very common question about this query is, does it have to have this structure? I.e., does the nation table need to come first? Does the stock table need to come second? Does the order of the equality need to be this specific way? And the answers to those questions are no. The nation table does not have to come first. The stock table does not have to come second. The order of the equality can be flipped. Here is me demonstrating that. Select star from stock, join nation on stock.natcode is equal to nation.natcode, semicolon. And if I run this, we see that the only difference in the results between the two queries is that in this version of the query, the stock tables columns show up first in the results, and then we see the nation tables columns. That is the only difference. Now, another question that comes up very frequently is that why do you precede natcode with the term stock dot? Why do we precede the other natcode with nation dot? Well, here's why. Take a look at this form of the query that does not work. Select star from stock, join nation on natcode is equal to natcode. Now, you just reading it as an individual are confused probably. Wait, what is this natcode? What is this natcode? If we reading this might find it hard to interpret, look at what happens when I execute it. It does not execute. And the reason it does not execute is because I see this error. Let us read this error and try to understand what this means. It says column natcode in the on clause is ambiguous. Ambiguous, it is unclear. Why is it unclear? Because natcode as a column exists in both the tables in the query. So we need to be explicit about which natcode we are referring to. We need to make this unambiguous. And we do that by preceding natcode with either stock dot or nation dot. That is why we just don't leave it as natcode equal to natcode. This concludes a walkthrough of the manner in which to use joins in an SQL query. Please let me know if you have any questions. Thank you very much.